On the inside, holding on to the lead, Castle Knight by half a length. Fighting back bravely. Here comes John Casey. Deep stretch with a furlong to go. Castle Knight pulls away once again by a length and a half. John Casey battling back second on the outside. Three back, Ala Brava closing quickly, and Jig's Alarm 70 yards to go. Castle Knight on the inside, holding on.
Castle Knight wins the stymie, and very modestly, Nick. Besides your good training, in a story I read, you gave some credit to the gelding of this horse for his improvement.
Yes, that's right, Frank. This horse became unmanageable last year, and I told Mr. and Mrs. Jablo, I said, the best thing we could do for this horse is turn him out, blister him, and perhaps geld him, because he's just getting too tough to handle around the barn, and he just wasn't going right. So Mr. Jablo told me, well, you do what you think is best for the horse, and we turned him out and we gelded him, and I guess the rest is history.
It's 6 for 9 victories since then, Nick, and that is history.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I would like to further answer the question by giving you some pointers about the gelding process. When you make a decision like that, it is usually because the horse is not giving his all racing, or because he's, as Nick just said, unmanageable. And I think you gave the part of the answer, Nick. Whenever we trainers want to geld a horse, it's in consort. It's with the owner's, of course, approval.
Well, sure, Frank, because as you know, the syndications today are astronomical, so no one wants to cut a horse and leave himself out without a big payday. But in this case, it was a question of either Castle Knight being not a good horse, but I say a cheap horse, but now he's a good horse. So by gelding him, and we took this avenue instead of hoping what would have happened and guessing. So.
Well, that's the answer to your question there, that we take it in consort with the owners. Economically, of course, it is, as Nick said, a big move. They syndicate horses for $20 million, but still it's a decision that's wise. Overproduction in the horse business is not the answer. As a matter of fact, Nick, years ago in Kentucky, you used to get a 3-pound allowance if you ran a gelding like you did a filly, to encourage the gelding of not useful horses. As far as their gameness is concerned, it sometimes improves our attention to racing. Throughout history, there have been great geldings. Exterminator was a top gelding. The Mighty Kelso, a fabulous horse. And speaking of mighty, Forgo, none mightier. Take a look at his stretch run, a gelding, mind you. In the 1976 Marlborough, he was a gelding, had run dozens of good races as a gelding, had 136 pounds on his back. To the left of your screen, a finish that you will long remember, a big part of the racing picture, a tribute to the fact that not only can the Forgo run well, but that gelding does not hurt a racehorse. So, as far as the safety of it is concerned, the track veterinarian here, Dr. Manuel Gilman, made these comments to me today.
Frank, castrating horses is a common procedure. It's simple, it doesn't take long, and horses get over it very quickly. Horses can run 2 to 3 weeks after they've been castrated, and in general it doesn't change their racing ability. Once in a while you find a horse or a group of horses that are very studdish and they haven't got their mind on racing or training or anything else. Those particular horses will have a much better disposition after they're gelded, and they will race better. But in general, it doesn't seem to change them very much. Just makes them more amicable and easy to handle.
Well, I think Dr. Gilman's remarks, Nick, pretty well covered the subject. And as a matter of fact, gelding is getting acceptable. Up until about 20 years ago, a gelding could not run in the Belmont Stakes. But they are now allowed to run in it, and so they don't lose any eligibility. This is Belmont Park, the year 1948. Bob Feller was mowing down the American League batters. Harry Truman mowed down Dewey in the presidential election, and Citation became a Triple Crown winner as he coasted home in the Belmont Stakes that afternoon. 25 years, a quarter of a century, was to go by before another horse would win the Triple Crown, and what a beauty he was going to be. Secretariat, big and chestnut and fast, and a champion that will long be remembered. He made his very first start here in New York at Aqueduct on the 4th of July in 1972, and it was a bit of a disaster. Take a look at the start. His very first start on the right of your screen, he is buried by a horse just outside of him, and that memory went with Secretariat throughout his career. And he was always hesitant at the break and always had to be a stretch runner, albeit a very fast horse was he. He ran twice more right quickly, broke his maiden, won a non-winners of 2, and that second race was the first chance Ron Turcotte had on him. He won it, an allowance race at Saratoga, and got ready for the Hopeful. And what a brilliant performance that was for a 2-year-old. This is the Hopeful at Saratoga, 1972. The acceleration that this horse shows, and there you see him characteristically back the first part of it. Brilliant acceleration as he goes up on the outside of a big Hopeful field, takes the lead, and an easy victor. And with this victory, everybody knew that a champion was on the scene. Secretariat went on from this Hopeful victory, won the Futurity, was a favorite in the Champagne, won it and was disqualified. He redeemed himself by going on to win the Laurel Futurity, the Garden State Stakes, and that, along with his Hopeful victory, 7 out of 9 wins that year against the best in the land, made him 2-year-old of the year and Horse of the Year. That's a rare honor to give a fine young horse, whoever he may be, but Secretariat deserved it. The first part of the year, Secretariat went to Florida to get ready for his campaign, and his owner, Mr. Chenery, died. He was then syndicated for $6 million, a tremendous figure at that time. And of course, tremendous pressure on trainer Lucien Larn as he was here in Florida getting ready for his 3-year-old campaign. Secretariat trained in Florida, but he didn't run there. He came back here to Aqueduct, split horses and won the Bayshore, won the Gotham Mile, and then was entered in the Wood. The Wood Memorial that's run here every April, a very definitive race for 3-year-olds, and it was a big deal in 1973 because Secretariat was to meet Sham, a rapidly developing good 3-year-old colt that Frank Martin trained, had won a big stake in California, and they were to meet in the Wood, and an old nightmare nemesis caught Lucien Larn, an entry. A lot of us trainers dread entries with different owners, and that's what happened in the Wood Memorial. Lo and behold, Secretariat, the unbeatable, got beaten. He was 3rd. Angle Light, his stablemate, a different owner, won it, barely beating out Sham. Well, you can imagine what happened after that. The newspapers and the cliffhangers all said that he was lame and lazy and sick and no good and might well get beat in the Derby. And a lot of horses came to meet him in the Kentucky Derby. He was barely favored. When they got into the starting gate, and he broke slowly from his outside post position. We showed you that shot of the first race of his career. This had become a normal procedure for him, but you can't get much laster than last, and that's Secretariat way back at the left of your screen going into the first turn, absolutely last. But when they had gotten around to the quarter pole, the historic head of the stretch at Churchill Downs, he was challenging Sham, who had then gone to the lead. And that's the big chestnut, flashy, white-legged horse as he takes over the lead in the Kentucky Derby, sets a new track record. He lowers Northern Dancer's record. So fast did he run that Sham, the second horse, would have broken the track record that day. Now again, the believers were on Secretariat's team. They were going to Baltimore, traditionally the second leg of the Triple Crown at Pimlico for the Preakness, but the field was to be a different size. This time only 5 challengers showed up, but Sham was among them. He'd made the legitimate challenge, and he was in the starting gate as they broke in the Preakness Stakes. Watch this same situation. Secretariat drops back. He is last now. That merely means 6th in this race, but it is last. And this is the first turn you are watching. The first turn, and this is one of the most famous accelerations in racing. Not the stretch turn, but Secretariat pulls to the outside of his field. Turcotte chirps to him, and away he goes. It looks like they're turning for home, but they're barely at the three-quarter pole. And before you can say Secretariat, he's on the lead, and he never relinquished it. Now he set a new track record in the Derby, and here in the Preakness, which he takes the lead and takes the race, there was an argument about the time. The teletimer was supposed to malfunction. The Daily Racing Form said he set a new track record, but officially he didn't get credit for it. And now only left was the Belmont Stakes for the Triple Crown. It had been 25 years now without a Triple Crown winner. That was on everybody's mind as the Belmont approached. 6 horses in that time period had tried and failed. Tim Tam in '58, Carry Back in '61, Northern Dancer in 1964, Kauai King in '66, Majestic Prince in '69, and Canonero in '71 had all come a cropper. But Secretariat was destined to win, and win big. And let's take a look at the stretch run of the 1973 Belmont Stakes.
Secretariat leads his field by 18 lengths, and now Trace of Prince has taken second, and My Gallant has moved down to third. They're in the stretch. Secretariat has opened a 22-length lead. He is going to be the Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretariat to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance. He hits the finish 25.
That was a new track record. Ron Turcotte was aware that he was about to set one and pushed him and got it done. 3 track records in 3 Triple Crown events. He looked unbeatable, not so. Went to Saratoga, ran against older horses in the Whitney, and got beat. Some rudely said it was the Spanish Armada, a group of riders that put him on the rail. Some said the track was deep. Some said he'd been sick, but he got beat. And he had to atone. Jack Landry put together a marvelous Marlboro Cup. He ran against his own stablemate, Riva Ridge. He beat horses like Onion, who had beaten him, Cougar, Key to the Mint, Ten Tam, Riva Ridge. He set a new world's record for a 1 1/8, 45 3, and looked like the marvelous horse he was. And again, one of the jinxes that plagued him came back at him again. He was beaten in the Woodward Stakes. In all of his defeats, all 3 defeats, they said it was an early pace that caused his defeats. Brilliant victor in the Marlboro was Secretariat, then disappointing second in the Woodward, and now Lucien Laurin chose to show how versatile his fine champion was, and he ran him on the grass in the Man o' War Stakes. Beautiful action, a very fine victory over a good grass horse like Ten Tam. He set a new course record and made everybody realize that among his bag of tricks certainly was versatility. He's a syndicated horse at this time, remember, his Secretariat. His connections want him to go to stud. One more race was left. Of that, the Canadian Championship at Woodbine in Canada. Lucien Laurin, the trainer, a Canadian. Ron Turcotte, his regular rider, was not able to be in the irons. He had set down a 10-day suspension, and Eddie Maple was the pilot for his last victory. After this race, he made an appearance here at Aqueduct. Goodbye to the fans. Many people came to wish him goodbye and good luck. A few days later, he was flown to Lexington, Kentucky, and taken to his new home at Claiborne Farm, where he set up for stallion duties. He's been a success, and his real future is still ahead of him. Good luck to the great horse, Secretariat. Your first word is the word punter. And I think what might be confusing about that, it signifies football in most people's minds. If you look in the dictionary, punt also means to gamble or to bet against the house. It is more English and Irish than American in usage. The English still use it a great deal today. If they have a man who'll bet, he's a punter. Your next word, chalk. Chalk player. In the old days when the bookies were here, they had a board, a blackboard, and the horses' names were on it. And if some horse got a lot of attention, became a favorite, went from 8 to 5 to 6 to 5, the bookmakers would keep erasing with their finger putting new chalk ards. So a live horse became a chalk horse, a favorite, and a chalk player is a favorite better. Your next phrase, boat race. Well, that, of course, means fixed race. And the best I can find out from your grizzled old-timers is that in a boat race, which I have watched neither horse nor on the ocean, that the boats don't change position too often. Theoretically, in a fixed race, that's the key there, that they maintain their in-file position. Bill Daly is your next word. Well, that's named after an old racetracker, he very grizzled, Father Bill Daly, they used to call him, and it is said that he once had a jockey in the paddock and he gave him these instructions: go to the front and improve your position. So anytime there's a lead horse, a speed horse, he's said to be on the Bill Daly. Your next word is hard boot. Hard boot means Kentuckian, and around the turn of the century at Saratoga, the hard boots would come up to sell their horses, the Kentuckians, and they wore leather and animal hide boots, and it had been turned so hard, so stiff by the weather, that the Kentuckians were designated hard boots because of that apparel. Your next term is plater. Well, in the old racing verbiage, a prize, a stake, was given to good horses. A cheap plater sometime was given to the cheaper horses, and often in the selling races, and that was the origin of the claiming race, the origin of the claiming race. They would sell the winner, auction him after a race, and all he won for his trouble, a very small purse and a plate. So plater is synonymous with cheap horse. Your next word, bug boy. Well, that's the very obvious situation. The asterisks, 5 pound 1 asterisk, 7 pounds 2, and 10 pound 3. They look like a bug, hence bug boy. So many things make horse racing exciting. The great horses racing, the riders on them, the betting, the excitement of a Triple Crown. But certainly one of the features that's always fascinating is the bargain aspect. And throughout the history of racing, there have been great horses bought for a very little bit of money. Very likely, in all time, the most famous of thoroughbreds was Man o' War. And yes, this brilliant horse, this maybe greatest of all thoroughbreds, was a bargain. He was raised in Kentucky, but he was sold as a yearling in 1918 at Saratoga for $5,000. Defeated only once in his entire career. You're here watching him easily win his last start, that in Canada, a match race. But he is symbolic of the great horses of all time in our business. He was sold because of the war years, primarily. August Belmont sold him, but $5,000 is quite a purchase price for a horse of that moment. The next bargain that strikes my mind would be over 10 years later. World War II was on, and Alsab, a little average-bred colt raised in Kentucky, sold there at their auction for $700. He went on to win the Preakness. He won race after race. His trainer, Sarge Schwenke, was criticized for dancing every dance with him. Well, what a neat little horse he was. And you're at Narragansett now, watching him as the underdog in a match race with Whirlaway, hanging on gamely in 1942 to win this among many victories for the little $700 bargain basement purchase. The next in the list of great bargains would be a horse of older years when he was bought. Seabiscuit, fashionably bred, part of a big stable. They finally gave up on him and sold him for $2,500. And he was iron-hearted, if not iron-legged, and he went on and on. This is a lovely picture of him in training with his exercise rider up, and this is him, number 2, going to the post in a match race at Pimlico in Baltimore, Maryland, against War Admiral. And when they turned for home, the rags to riches horse, Seabiscuit, had defeated the brilliant and brilliantly bred War Admiral. I think maybe we've already seen something very good and very typical of the American feeling. It's the American dream translated into horse racing, and the rags to riches, the overlooked who succeed, are even more exciting. Rags to riches, of course, has appeal, and no horse in history had more appeal than Stymie, a $1,500 claim. The brilliant trainer Hearst Jacobs put a paddle in for him, as we say, claimed him right here in New York from the King Ranch, and gave only $1,500 for Stymie when he was a 2-year-old. Something about his ability to run at the end, something he liked about this, at that time, very unsuccessful young horse, made Hearst Jacobs claim Stymie. Stymie went on and won the Whitney. He was a factor, and he won the Metropolitan twice, and was a tremendous crowd pleaser here in New York. He won a great deal of money. He was a successful stallion. Mr. Jacobs named his farm in Maryland after Stymie, and he was a fine old campaigner to be bought for such a price. The same Hall of Fame trainer, the late Hearst Jacobs, went to Mr. Phipps when he was cutting down, as he always does, as big stables always do, and bought a mare named Searching, for filly named Searching, for $15,000. She won 25 races and over $500,000. She had families that are just one blue hen mare after another, the family of Affectionately, and on, and seemed to prove what people always thought, that Hearst Jacobs had something extra, something that most horsemen don't have, just a feeling for what to buy and how to run it. Most of the horses we've told you now have either been bought in auction or claimed. This was an unusual way to get a bargain. Jack Price, the breeder of Carryback, had a farm in Ohio, and apocryphal as the story is, the dam of Carryback Joppy was taken by him for a board bill. She was valued at about $300. She was bred to Saggy, a not very popular sire, and here comes, from that mating, the 1961 Derby winner Carryback. So a different way to have a bargain basement beginning. A little more modern in times, but still an incredible purchase. This time a yearling purchase, Seattle Slew. In my opinion, one of the greatest horses ever to race, was bought for $17,500 as a yearling. You see trainer Billy Turner giving Jean Cruguet a leg up in the Belmont Stakes here at Belmont Park. This horse, who won the Triple Crown, and incidentally, the only undefeated horse to ever win the Triple Crown, was a brilliant fast racehorse, a fast horse who could carry his speed, a handsome horse, has great potential at stud, and certainly a historical purchase for $17,500. This, the stretch run of his successful bid for the Triple Crown, the Belmont Stakes. He's in front. I think an exciting sports picture, although his judgment was criticized for doing it, is jockey Jean Cruguet rising there in his salute to victory. Well, the 70s was considered a great decade of champions. It was a great decade for bargains. Spectacular Bid, the Bid, as he was affectionately, shortly called, was purchased for $37,000. He was later syndicated. This is he winning the Marlboro Cup. He was syndicated just last year for $21 million. That's quite a profit on a $37,000 investment. A marvelous buy, a marvelous racehorse, maybe the only sport left when you can get that much value for a dollar. The fair sex was not left out of all of these great bargain situations, and here may be the fairest of them all. Genuine Risk, winning the 1980 Kentucky Derby, $32,000 bought her at public auction when she was 1 year old. Here you see her beating Rumbo in the 1980 Kentucky Derby. This year, everybody voted for the Horse of the Year, John Henry. Marvelous old campaigner. Well, what about his purchase price? Sold for $1,100 as a yearling. You think that was a fluke? He was then sold for $2,200. He was sold for $7,500 and given back to the seller. He was sold for $10,000. And finally, Sam Rubin bought him for $25,000. the greatest money-winning horse of all time. And these things continue to go on. Just 6 months ago, John Campo, in front of everybody in a public auction at Saratoga, bought Princelet for $50-some $100. He since won several stakes, is worth many hundred times that purchase price. So if you can be in the right place, the right time, with the right trainer, it could happen to you.
I'd never seen it before. It really made me chuckle after the race. The field was in the stretch. Solidify had the lead. Right behind Solidify was Marquez, and the rider was Emilio Gomez. Emilio drew his whip in his left hand to strike Marquez and inadvertently caught the tail of Solidify. The whip was absolutely tangled. Emilio could not withdraw the whip from the tail, was unable to strike Marquez. Apparently the horse really needed that because he faded out of the money. After the race, the stewards reviewed the tapes, thought a lot about the incident, but found no grounds for official action. You'll see everything here at the track.
But Monday of this week, excitement was not the story. Tragedy was the story. In the 9th race, going into the turn, the mount of Amado Credito Jr. stumbled. He was unseated as Spartan Monk bobbled here. He went to the ground. Several of the horses in the field passed over him, and their unmeaning hooves are the cause of his death. Danger is not the selling point of racing, and danger is not something advertised or thought about a great deal, but it never goes away. In the last 40 years, an average of 3 riders a year have been killed. Dozens of permanently injured riders are among our ranks. Of recent years, Ron Turcotte, David Ashcroft, Sammy Balmitas Jr., and many others have suffered permanent disabilities. It is a most dangerous sport. Maybe not considered so very often in the public's mind, but what you just saw brings the point very vividly home. It has gotten so that many, and maybe always was, so that many old pro horsemen who wish for victory a great deal first hope that rider and horse come back safely. And that is not always the case.
This week's Ask Frank Wright winner is William Friedman of Stamford, Connecticut. And William wants to know, because there are so many who want a Triple Crown victory, how are excess horses in the Triple Crown races dealt with? Here with the answer is Charles C.
For William, attrition is the single greatest factor in paring down the bulky ranks to the elite few we now have contending for the Triple Crown. A look at the experimental handicap will give you an idea of how difficult the transition can be from 2-year-old to 3-year-old. Now, the experimental is a professional ranking by weight of the top 2-year-old performers of 1981, and if we look at each one of these top-weighted colts one by one, we'll see what their status is now, and you'll see some of the problems they've encountered. Deputy Minister was top-weighted on the list at 126 pounds. He was last year's 2-year-old champion colt. He made 2 starts this year. He has not won a race, and he is sidelined indefinitely with an ankle injury. Co-top weighted on the list was Timely Rider. Many felt he might have been 2-year-old champion colt. but he was not voted that. But he is the only colt of the top 4 to have won a race this year. He won the Flamingo Stakes in convincing style, and he is the favorite for the Kentucky Derby at this point. Dacour, a Secretariat colt that many felt would be the favorite for the Kentucky Derby at this point, has not won a race this year. He is in training, however, and is in Kentucky, pointing for the Bluegrass Stakes. The top 2-year-old in California, Stalwart, never even made it to the races this year. He suffered a bowed tendon and has been retired to stud. Now, those are the top 4 horses on the list. They earned over $1 million last year. Only one of them has won a single race so far this year. Castleria is the most consistent colt coming out of California. He's the one-eyed colt who has never been off the board in his life. He is a stakes winner this year and is very much a contender for the Triple Crown at this point. Laser Light was the winner of the Remsen Stakes last year here at Aqueduct. He has run once this year, finished 3rd. He is entered in today's Florida Derby. Let's Don't Fight was the winner of the Arlington, Washington Futurity last year, a very promising colt, but tragically fractured his sesamoids and had to be humanely destroyed. The ability to get a distance of ground weeds out a good many horses. Out of Hot was the top sprinter last year, but it seems that that's the best he can do is sprint. He has not won a race this year and cannot go beyond 6 furlongs. Tropic Ruler was another nice colt with a great deal of speed, but he has proven that he cannot get a distance of ground, and also he has been injured in his last start in the Jim Beam Sparrow Stakes and is sidelined indefinitely. El Baba, as we just saw, is in good shape, coming up to the Triple Crown in fine order with 3 victories under his belt this year. And Gato del Sol is a nice colt out of California who wants to run all day long, and he's closing stoutly through the stretch, and he could be a factor later on in the Triple Crown. Of course, some of these colts who have been sidelined and gone away now have been replaced by other colts who are coming up nicely. Shimatory, Star Gallant, and any number of colts who might develop later on in the year. Journey at Sea is another good California colt who will be coming along eastward to contend for the Triple Crown. It's a constantly changing picture, William, so I'd keep my eye on it because the situation is always in a flux. Thank you for your question.
Since people started betting on horses, the idea has occurred to the ill-advised to substitute one horse for another. Before modern means of identifying were available, the paddock judge was the man who had to do it, usually an ex-clocker with a very sharp eye, and he was responsible to identify and be sure that the right horse was brought over for the right race. There have been efforts up until very recently by people to try to run a fast horse in the name of a slow horse. But now a lot is on the side of the honest people. There are several great methods for identifying thoroughbreds. One of them is tattooing, and we will show you a film that gives you all the ways in which people tattoo and register horses so that they're easily identifiable.
Well over 23,000 thoroughbreds foaled in the United States and Canada are registered with the Jockey Club annually. 8 basic colors are recognized, and look-alikes in both coat, markings, and conformation are common. To the general public, even famous horses are difficult to recognize unless oddly marked or colored. Many great ones, such as Buckpasser and Round Table, both bays, or Kelso, registered as dark bay or brown, have no obvious markings. At the racetrack, saddlecloth numbers and owner's silks clearly identify each starter. And of course, such unique thoroughbreds as the aptly named White Beauty are instantly recognized. But even color can be deceptive and will change from season to season and with age. Alfred G. Vanderbilt's great native dancer was steel gray at 2, but in the manner of gray thoroughbreds, became increasingly light with age. What happens then when natural disasters, as fire or flood, scatters thoroughbreds for miles around? Can these horses, or a mere runaway, be positively returned to proper owners? The answer is yes. A quarter century ago, a rash of ringers, a fast horse running in the name of a slow look-alike, made the need for a positive identification system apparent. Spencer J. Drayton, who had just established the TRA's Thoroughbred Racing Protective Bureau, gave the problem top priority. Today, all over North America, TRPB thoroughbred tattoo technicians utilize a set of multi-needle dies to provide each individual with lifetime positive identification by means of a lip tattoo. The system neither mars a horse's looks, as with branding, nor causes much discomfort. Well over 200,000 thoroughbreds have been positively identified in this manner since 1946. Each winter, TRPB technicians are sent to major racing centers where the new crop of 2-year-olds are tattooed. The procedure, recommended by the National Association of State Racing Commissioners, is now mandatory in virtually all American and Canadian racing states and provides positive identification of thoroughbreds racing at all tracks. The tattoo team, often accompanied by a TRPB field agent, uses the Jockey Club registration to verify identity of this gray filly, named Sweet Promises. An adaptation of the Jockey Club registration number will be indelibly imprinted on her upper lip, preceded by a letter which will indicate the year she was foaled. The upcoming unedited full-length sequence of a lip tattoo team in action shows the entire humane, sanitary, professional procedure. From the mild reaction of the filly, it is obvious that the discomfort is minor. Many thoroughbreds have been tattooed in the morning and have won their race that afternoon. The entire tattoo procedure with the 2-year-old filly Sweet Promises lasted just 60 seconds. The specially designed camera records a picture of the completed tattoo, which is filed at the TRPB headquarters and ensures against any attempt to alter the numbers. Each thoroughbred entered at a TRA track is positively identified before being allowed to race. Normal procedure calls for checking the thoroughbred with his Jockey Club registration as the horse comes under the track official's control. The long-ago practice of illegally substituting one thoroughbred for another, running a ringer, is so remote today as to be non-existent.
Well, this system of tattooing is used all over the United States. But here in New York, an additional identifying precaution is taken. With me, Dr. Manuel Gilman, the track veterinarian here at New York. And Dr. Gilman, we do have an extra precaution, a system for identification.
Yes, we do, Frank. We have a front and a side view picture of the horse in color. And in addition to that, we have 4 life-size night eyes. The night eyes are little calluses that are found inside the front legs and inside the rear legs, just above the knees in front and just below the hocks behind. Apparently, it's what's left of the 5th digit in the front and the 4th digit in the back leg. And there's no rhyme or reason for the size or the shape of these night eyes. We've studied them, and they never change in a horse's racing career from 2 to 10. We've even studied dams and their foals, full brothers, full sisters, and we even had a couple of twins that we studied, and they had different night eyes. Of course, they weren't identical twins. So, in other words, nature put them on the horse, as we see it, to be able to tell one horse from another.
Are they like the human fingerprint?
They're the homologue of the human fingerprint. They're better than the human fingerprint in that you don't need a microscope or a magnifying glass to examine them. We just go for the size and the shape of each one. And they all vary, and we've never found two horses that had the same set of night eyes.
How do you do this in the day my horse runs? How do you use them?
Well, the day the horse runs, the identifier goes to the horse. He goes over the markings of the horse with the foal certificate, and if it checks, then he takes these photographs. The photographs, the front and side view photograph, are taken on one lens, and then they turn the camera so that another lens takes the night eyes. There's an armature on this camera which takes the night eyes at 1/3 size. And when they're developed and printed, they bring them back up to life size. We take the pictures, we develop them, print them, and we have them for the book, for the paddock, in 2 hours' time.
Well, that's a fine procedure. Thank you, Dr. Gilman. And Sam, I guess it boils down to this. You come out here and bet New York, what you see is what you got. Thank you very much for writing to us.